to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hi, I'm Dinosaurs, and welcome to another episode of the Truth in My Days radio program. Today, I'm here with John Torres and Jason Chan as they discuss the important topic of creation and evolution. We are continuing from the previous episode. We hope you enjoy.
In Job 40, God refers to an animal that's called the Behemoth. And it's written as Behemoth. It's just a transliteration straight out of the Hebrew. It's not translated because nobody knows for sure what animal it refers to. And it gives a description here. His strength is in his hips. His power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. So we're talking about a very large, powerful animal with a long tail, and it doesn't fit anything alive today that we know of. Some liberal scholars suggest that, this is a hippopotamus, but a hippopotamus doesn't move his tail like a cedar, and be a hippopotamus isn't really all that impressive. And these are animals meant by God to show how impressive they are. Right. And the next chapter refers to something that looks even scarier, something that, once again, is transliterated, not translated as Leviathan, or Leviathan. And again, a very fearsome animal, so scary that people cannot overpower it in any way. And so people have suggested, some commentators, that these are references to two different types of dinosaurs that were still alive in Job's day. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've always been taught that dinosaurs died out long before humans. So to think that they lived alongside one another, that's new to me.
It is, and it's an idea that a lot of people, even Christians, have trouble wrapping their heads around because they're so used to hearing that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago.
Right.
If you ask them, how do you know that? Most of them can't actually give you an answer.
I was just told that.
Exactly. They believe it because that's what they've heard over and over again. Now, you raise this idea, and of course the secular people will mock you. I remember in one political campaign some years back, one of the candidates was actually a six-day young Earth creationist. He believed that dinosaurs and people lived at the same time, and the liberal minister mocked him, saying, and this was a killer line, "The Flintstones is not a documentary." And that is quite a devastating line, and how do you come back from that? Mm-hmm. Well, I think you could point out that The Flintstones is not a documentary, but then neither is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The idea that somehow you can put some kind of mutagen on reptiles and have them turn into hominids is also fiction, and yet that's what the theory of evolution believes. You can point out that X-Men is not a documentary. People do not mutate new terms that give DNA that gives them new abilities, which again is what evolution is fundamentally dependent on, developing new traits by mutations. X-Men 2, not a documentary. X-Men 3, not a documentary. And for that matter, Frankenstein is not a documentary either. The idea that you can take non-living matter and bring it to life simply by zapping it with electricity, as Frankenstein has, these are not documentaries at all. So if we're talking about what's fictional, theory of evolution is much more fictional than Six-Day Young Earth creationism. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. I had a side question though. How do we, I'm not sure if this belongs in here, but how do we know that Job was written maybe a couple hundred years before Abraham?
There's several indications. First of all, we know that he has to be either a Gentile or before the time of Moses, because in his long debate with his friends about what kind of sin he must be doing, their idea, his three friends' idea, is that he must have been sinning, and that's why these disasters fell upon him. And all he has to do is figure out what he did wrong and confess it, and everything will be hunky-dory. But in this whole long book debating morality and sin, there's never a mention or appeal to the law.
I see.
So it has to be before Moses' time, or he was a Gentile, not under the law of Moses.
I see.
Which he was, in fact. He was a Gentile. And then he performs sacrifices. Like Abraham did, he makes his own sacrifices. Once he had the Mosaic law, only the priests were allowed to do that.
Right.
But before that, ordinary people. So he seems to be certainly before Moses, but there's more than just that. It's how old did he live? There are indications in the text. If you look at the Septuagint text of Job 42:16, I believe it is, he lived 248 years.
Okay.
As you go through the age of the patriarchs, you find that from Adam onwards to the flood, their lifespans were very, very consistent between 700 and 900 years. There's no real drop-off. Once you get to the flood, there's a sudden drop-off in lifespans. And that's probably because conditions did change dramatically in the world after the flood. But you have this rapid drop-off. By the time you get to Abraham, he lived 175 years. By the time you get to Moses, 125. By the time you get to Psalms, they're talking about 80 years. So there's a steady drop-off. So you look at that drop-off, you can get quite a nice curve out of it. You look at where 248 years, and where would that fit?
I see.
And it takes him to about the time of Peleg, who was one of Abraham's ancestors.
Okay.
So that's how we know. There are actually some indications in the text, according to some scholars, that say that the aftermath, the things that happened to the world after the flood, were actually still going on at the time of Job, or at least he still had living memory of those things. So it is an old book.
Okay.
Now, besides mentions in the Bible, here's another thing that these evolutionists and old earth people overlook. All around the world, in many different and disparate cultures, we have drawings and carvings and representations of creatures that happen to look just like dinosaurs. And the question then becomes, how did people all over the world come up with these pictures and drawings that look just like dinosaurs if they never saw them? There's a Native American petroglyph, for example, under the Kachina Bridge, the Natural Bridges National Monument in Utah, which has a picture of something that looks very, very much like a Diplodocus. It's got the little round head, the long snake-like neck, the big thick body, 4 thick legs, and then a long, long tail after it. Medieval pictures and carvings all over the world have things that look like dinosaurs on them. You have the knights in England, the knights fighting the dragons. And we laugh at the idea of dragon, but that's just the name they use. The term dinosaur wasn't actually coined until the 18th century. Dragon is as good a term as any other. But when we read the descriptions of dragons from all over the world, they look very much like different types of dinosaurs. And that would suggest that they survived at least into the Middle Ages in some places. And St. George fighting the dragon might be based on actual reality. There is a carving on a temple wall at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which looks exactly like a stegosaurus. It's got the thick, high, humped back, the 4 thick legs, the tail, the very distinctive head of the stegosaurus, and then along the back, those plates are the most distinctive feature of stegosaurus. And once again, you have to ask, if nobody ever saw these creatures, how come they came up with carvings and petroglyphs that look exactly like them? If you go where the evidence leads, as science is supposed to, the only reasonable conclusion is that, yes, these animals did exist in the time of people. And that's how they got these pictures from. Comments?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I had no idea that there were all these references to dinosaurs even so long ago. So, yeah, that makes sense, Sean.
Yeah, it's obviously the school systems are not going to be trying to promote these or letting you know about them. But then we also have some interesting, in the last less than 20 years, some very interesting new scientific discoveries. I asked you this question when we were discussing the Tolly footprints. What happens when stunning new evidence emerges to overthrow the consensus view fossils, and we went through the total footprints, and we saw what happened. What happened when the stunning new evidence comes out?
Yeah, well, we're supposed to, strongly consider the evidence and throw up the consensus view, but it doesn't look like that happened.
No, the exact opposite happened. They rallied behind the cover story. The footprints were made by Australopithecus, which they know and we know is impossible, but that's their story and they're sticking to it. Another very interesting thing happened, and this was in the early 2000s. Here's a write-up from the May 2006 issue of Smithsonian Magazine, and it's titled Dinosaur Shocker. Probing a 68 million-year-old T-Rex, Mary Schweitzer stumbled upon astonishing signs of life that may radically change our view of the beasts that once ruled the earth. It starts out saying she is not your typical paleontologist. Why not? Well, she's supposedly a Bible-believing Christian. And here's what happened with her. She's an expert in paleontology, obviously. And she was taking delivery of a T-Rex bone. Tyrannosaurus Rex, very valuable, very rare. When you find them, you take very good care of them. The last thing you would do is break them. But in this case, I think it was during the excavation, one of the bones got broken. And so for the first time, a paleontologist had a good chance to look inside, and Mary Schweitzer decided, let's look inside and see what we see. It's broken anyway, we may as well take a look. To her shock, what she found was soft tissues. Amazing soft tissues. Blood cell-like bodies. Blood vessels. Bone-forming osteocytes. So many different things. Even DNA. And the significance of this, pay attention to finding amazed colleagues who had never imagined that even a trace of still soft dinosaur tissue could survive. Why not? What does it say there?
After all, as any textbook will tell you, when an animal dies, soft tissues such as blood vessels, muscle, and skin decay and disappear over time, while hard tissues like bone may gradually acquire minerals from the environment and become fossils.
Okay. So remember, the article admits here, as any textbook will tell you, that this is not a radical idea. This was established scientific fact based on a great deal of experimentation and observation, the way science is supposed to work. Every textbook would have told you at the time that the soft tissues disappear. Only the bones remain, and they become permineralized and become fossils.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part tomorrow. Same time and same place. If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.